A retired hitman leaving his dark past to spend time with his wife. What seemed to be a happy ending for John Wick quickly becomes the start of a bloodbath.
And your son took that from me, stole that from me, killed that from me! People keep asking if I'm back, and I haven't really had an answer. But now, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back!
The very few things which symbolized his gateway for freedom and happiness were snatched and taken away from him. This would lead to a chain of events throughout the movies to become something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. From avenging his dog to becoming the most wanted man in the criminal underworld, killing any and everyone who stood in his path. We eventually inevitably see his wrath unravel into his downfall. This is the tragic character arc of John Wick.
Whoever comes, whoever it is, I'll kill them. I'll kill them all.
Following the loss of his wife, she leaves him a final goodbye gift, a dog to help him grieve. Being retired, he spends a lot of time with the dog and his beloved car. That was until this happened. Two of the few remaining things left in the world which represented his happiness and freedom, taken by this man, Josef Tarasov, the son of Viggo Tarasov, a crime boss and a former associate of John Wick. And when Viggo attempts to advocate peace between his son and him, John declares war without saying a single word. Viggo understands John's capability as an assassin, so he sends 12 assassins to John's house, but none of them leave. After the failed assassination, Viggo sets a $2 million bounty on John Wick and offers it to Marcus, John's former mentor, who accepts the contract. But he only accepts to buy John time, reducing the chances of him getting killed by another professional hitman, or in this case, woman. As if he had rejected the contract, then the chances are Viggo will just offer the contract to another assassin. Meanwhile, John gears up through the Continental Hotel, a hotel catered for assassins and criminals where they can get weapons, information and equipment for their jobs. However, within these Continental hotels there are rules everyone must abide by. As this is a neutral ground for assassins and criminals, conducting any business or violence will lead to severe consequences. But moving on, John manages to gather intel from Winston, the owner of the New York City Continental, and hunts down Josef in a nightclub. However, he manages to escape. Later, John oversteps in an outnumbered battle and is eventually caught by Viggo's men. And here we could truly see his anger and resentment.
Give me your son, John Wick. Until that dog arrived on my doorstep, a final gift from my wife. And your son took that from me, stole that from me, killed that from me!
Even when he is in no place to negotiate, you would expect most people to compromise or surrender in a losing position. But John Wick doubles down, saying the only solution is if he hands over his son. Luckily, with the help of Marcus, he manages to escape and catches up to Viggo, where he would reveal Josef's location.
Is kept in a safe house, Brooklyn, 434 Wallace Place.
He goes to Josef's location and finishes off what he started, avenging his dog. But he still has one more problem to deal with: Viggo. Viggo had found out Marcus was assisting John, so he had him killed. Winston, a man who believes in fairness and justice like John, informs him of Viggo's location, allowing John to kill Viggo, leaving no loose ends, solidifying John Wick Chapter 1. But just as you would expect John to be finished with the criminal underworld, he is approached by Santino de Antonio, a crime boss who helped John retire in the past, and in return John swore to a marker for him, which is essentially an unbreakable vow and blood oath, and Santino needed him to get back into the criminal world and assassinate his sister, so he can gain complete power over the Kimura crime family. But John refuses, making it clear that he was finished with that life. And just as we thought there was nothing else for him to lose, Santino blows up his house. He does survive the attack though, and heads to the Continental Hotel, where Winston reminds him that rejecting the marker would be breaking one of the 2 forbidden rules of the underworld. So John, left with no choice, accepts the marker and assassinates Santino's sister. But after finishing the job, Santino double crosses him and sets his henchmen and right-hand woman Ares to kill him. And you might be wondering the reasoning behind the betrayal. Well,
hello, John. I understand if you're upset. And I know it might feel personal. But what kind of man would I be if I didn't avenge my sister's murder?
Which adds fuel to the already burning fire that John has. Not only did Santino force John back into the life he was avoiding, but he betrays him. And we're soon going to see how this one mistake becomes probably John's and Santino's worst mistake. With all the emotions and anger, he allows his emotions to cloud his judgment and shoots Santino inside the Continental, breaking one of the forbidden rules of the underworld. Now, John could have waited a later time and date to kill Santino, or put it behind him and leave the underworld for good. But John doesn't care if he's to suffer the consequences. As discussed, he has nothing to lose. For him, it's about vengeance and justice, and always has been from the beginning. When Vigo tried to negotiate with John earlier, there was no other possible outcome other than Losef paying the consequences. And here with Santino, there is no other choice but for him to die, regardless of the rules. But as a result of breaking the rules and killing a crime boss who was part of the High Table, his bounty is now doubled to $14 million and has been declared excommunicado, terminated from continental grounds and left vulnerable to assassination.
You kill the man on company grounds, Jonathan. You leave me no choice but to declare you excommunicado. The doors to any service or provider in connection with the Continental are now closed.
And this is where I believe we move on to the downfall in the John Wick saga, as the first 2 movies showcase the series of the unfortunate events, but because of all the compounding anger, from his wife passing, his dog killed, his car stolen, him being betrayed, which lead him to avenge the wrongdoings in his life, he now has to suffer the consequences of his actions. Being a marked man with a $14 million bounty on his head, we immediately get action from the very beginning as he retrieves a marker and a necklace at the library. Meanwhile, the adjudicator, who is a representative of the High Table, a table with the 12 heads of the crime family and the most powerful organization in the underworld, visits Winston and the Bowery King, where they have 7 days to essentially retire their positions in the underworld for previously helping John.
Do you know what happens when I wave my hand? No, there will be no replacement for me on the throne, because I am the throne, baby! I am the Bowery!
After surviving the initial attack at the library, John visits the director, his adoptive mother and a crime boss. He hands over the crucifix necklace as a form of currency, which allows him safe passage to Casablanca. There he would meet Sophia, where he gives her the marker and asks for the location of the Elder. The Elder is the only person above the High Table who can pardon him. So John finds the Elder and attempts to remove his excommunicado and become a free man once again. But in order for that to happen, he has to kill Winston, and he agrees. To show his commitment, he severs his finger and offers his wedding ring to the Elder. which also happens to be his last symbol attached to his wife. Meanwhile, the Adjudicator recruits Zero and his men to visit both the Bowery King and the director, killing many of their associates as a consequence of helping Wick. When John returns back to New York City, he is confronted by Zero and his ninjas, where he manages to escape on a motorcycle whilst being chased by Zero to the Continental. There, Wick speaks to Winston, but refuses to kill him, as John refused to complete the Elder's deal and Winston refused to retire his position at the Continental Hotel. The Adjudicator declared the Continental deconsecrated and sent armed units to kill John and Winston. Having killed the ninjas and Zero, the Adjudicator offers to negotiate, coming to agreements of Winston reclaiming his Continental.
The High Table accepts your fealty.
But that John Wick still remains a problem for the High Table. So, Winston betrays and shoots John off an entire building. And I think from here we can assume what John Wick Chapter 4 leads into. If you've not figured it out already, Chapter 4 begins as John and the Bowery King prepare their revenge against the High Table. The first step in John's plan was to retrieve his wedding ring back from the Elder. But after the previous Elder left with the ring, John Wick was unable to get back his last token of his freedom.
Not really.
This shows not even the highest of all escapes the wrath of John Wick. This is where John Wick truly becomes a monster. This is John Wick versus the entire underworld. The High Table responds by electing Winston as the person in charge, where he attempts to turn Winston against Wick, but Winston fails to do so. As punishment, Vincent declares him excommunicado, has the New York Continental destroyed, and executes Sharon. Vincent then travels to Paris and enlists Kane, a blind and retired hitman assassin, to kill John, threatening to murder Kane's daughter otherwise. So Kane and Vincent's right-hand man, Chidi, hunt down John where he is currently residing at the Osaka Continental. A fight breaks out between John and the hotel's staff against the High Table's assassins. They eventually get interrupted by Mr. Nobody, a bounty hunter attempting to claim John's bounty, but eventually decides to not kill him for the price being too low. John arrives back in New York City and meets with Winston at Sharon's gravesite. Both having similar interest in taking out Vincent, they formulate a plan to challenge Marquis or Vincent to a formal battle. Winning will free him of his obligation to the High Table. These duels have many traditions and rules. Both parties must discuss their demands and rules of engagement at a predetermined location. The rules of engagement are decided through a card game where a representative from each party flips a random steel card on the table. Whoever bears the higher number will decide either time, weapon, or location. Also, John can only request a duel on behalf of a crime family, so he rejoins his previous crime family, now owned by his adoptive sister. In order to join, he had to carry out an assassination on a big boy, mob boss Killer Harkan. In a prolonged battle, John manages to eventually kill him and is now able to rejoin the family, where he would go on to challenge Vincent to a duel. The duel is announced, the time is set, and the rules are written. Vincent does try to prevent John from arriving at the duel by placing a $26 million bounty on his head before the duel occurs. And on the way to the duel, John fights off hordes of assassins with the help of Mr. Nobody, who sides with John after he saves his dog. John eventually makes it to the duel but is sustaining injuries from the previous assassins. Ultimately, the duel ends with Vincent dying and everyone is free from the chaos. But after suffering multiple injuries from the duel and from beforehand, John Wick peacefully sits down and stares into the horizon, reminiscing about his wife, with the story starting and ending there.